Hey everybody, Bobby Selvaggio here, and thank you so much for joining me for the first of a series of video shorts I'm looking to produce. This is really just a way for me to talk about the experiences I have had as a musician for, now over 30 years, and those experiences meaning aspects of how I practice music, um, the performance aspects of being a musician, recording records, producing tours, putting together various projects, and being an educator. And I'm hoping that these simple thoughts that I'm going to talk about will give some insight into not only myself, but how, as musicians, we think and go about our daily lives. What I wanted to start with today was just a simple kind of topic, and it's more about the philosophical approach of how I think about music. Uh, I'm starting with this because this is actually going to set up a lot of the discussions that I'm planning on having. And this philosophical approach I call the improvisational driven process. And this process is really a way for me to wrap my head around how I, again, practice and how I think about music. This improvisational driven process and how I think of it, I really break up into kind of four main elements. And those elements are ear training, technique, theory, and style. And none of this is new or anything like that. But again, it's a way for me to wrap my head around thinking about this very dense concept of being an improvising musician. Um, as a spontaneous improviser, we have to be able to look at one thing and see about being able to apply it to every situation, not just to one situation. And so going through this process allows me to think that way. When it comes to ear training, the thing about ear training is very simple concepts. The first thing is, and this is something I tell my students all the time, and I joke with them that if you're not sure what answer to give me, just give me this answer, which is listening. We start with listening to music, and I mean immersing yourself in a very deep way to listen to music and all kinds of music: jazz music, classical, pop, rock music, hip hop, African drumming music, Indian music, Brazilian music, everything you can get your hands on. Because the thing about being an improvising musician and just a musician in general is we want to be inspired by all of the elements of melody, rhythm, and harmony that come from all these various styles of music. It really sets up the idea of how we hear things. And if we can't hear it, we can't play it. And the idea of hearing something is more than just listening to music. It's this idea of being able to have a reference point, if you will, a starting place. Because without that, we are limited with what we can then play in a spontaneous improvisational way. Another aspect of ear training, and this is something that is a very simple thing we talk about in jazz music, which is this idea of call and response. This is something I've brought into being an educator, even when I was private teaching beginning students. As soon as they knew three notes, I would start doing call and response with them. And it built an understanding, a culture of them not relying on what's on the page, if you will, of focusing on what they hear and then immediately responding to that. And that's something that should be part of music education at every level. And then the last part of ear training is another simple concept we deal with in jazz all the time, which is this idea of transcribing. And transcribing is, the simple concept of hearing music, writing it down, and using it for analysis. And I'm not going to get too deep into any of these individual things right now because, again, these are going to be future discussions. The second of the four concepts of this improvisational driven process is this idea of technique. And the thing about technique is simple. For me, technique is simply the ability to play anything you hear, to facilitate every sound and shape and idea that we hear. And, the thing about technique is we're trying to get to the point where we can free ourselves from the way we facilitate our instruments. You want to free yourself from your instrument so that the instrument is beside the point from how you hear things. It can be a medium in anything you pick up. Whether it's like for me, if I play my alto or soprano saxophone, if I'm sitting at the piano, if I'm sitting at the drum set, it's all about how you hear things and getting to the point of having enough facility to be able to get that across. The third aspect of improvisational driven process is this idea of theory. Now, again, we all understand what theory is, but it's this deep understanding of theory of not just knowing what it is, but being able to apply it and apply it in an absolutely immediate standpoint. It's just like technique. There's an immediacy that you have to have when you're dealing with one thing and being able to try to play it any particular way. There has to be an immediacy to how we approach that. And that's important with technique, and it's important with theory. Seeing a chord and immediately being able to hear and understand what scale goes with that. And whatever the case with theory, and I'm going to spend some time talking about how I look at theory and how I look at applying it in an improvisational sense. And then the last aspect of this improvisational driven process is the idea of style. And style for me is when you start to get into not just the head aspect of music, but the heart aspect of music. Style's a deep thing, man. It goes far beyond just, I play jazz, so that's the style I play. I mean, within jazz music, we have so many styles that we can play in. Two basic ones are the concepts of outlining chords and outlining modes. Those are very different styles, and you have to deeply understand what each one means to be able to do that. The other thing about style is from a historical context and a tradition context. I mean, the thing about jazz is we have to understand not just who Coltrane was and what he played, not just who Miles was and what he played, but who they were, the traditions they came out of, the fact that, jazz music, the traditions of that is that it is Black American music. And everything that goes along with that from a musical standpoint and from a social standpoint. I mean, we have to understand that, or we're missing the connection between what we're trying to play and how we're trying to play it. And, it's the thing about improvisation is we have to understand that we get past this idea of here's a lick, learn it in all 12 keys, here's a tune, play those over this tune, now go. We have to get past that. And I know for myself, what has helped me wrap my head around all that is looking at each one of these elements and how they apply to what I'm trying to do as an individual to moving the music forward. We can't be innovators without a firm grasp of understanding all of the basic fundamental aspects of what we're trying to do, musically speaking. And so this idea of the improvisational driven process, and this is going to set us up for some of these future discussions that I'm going to be producing and putting together. So what I'll be doing at the end of each one of these videos is I will be including my website, so that if you want to reach out to me and just say, you enjoy what you're doing, or can you talk about this subject, or if you want to maybe get together one-on-one and have a deeper conversation about these things I'm going to be talking about, you can reach me through my website. I'm also going to include my Venmo account, and if you feel moved to help in the process of me producing these through a donation, I would appreciate that. I can't thank you again enough for joining me. Next time I'm going to be getting my saxophone out and playing a little bit, and we'll have a little fun with that. So until next time, be safe and well.